Welcome to Your True Calling. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Dr. Michelle Chappell, a psychologist and a rock star. I've helped thousands of people find their true purpose by discovering their one-of-a-kind superpowers. Each week, I'll share tools and client success stories to help you find gifts you don't know you have so that you can thrive in a career that fills your soul and passion projects that make you feel whole. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be talking to my dear friend, Dr. Diane Dreher, who is an expert on helping people find their true calling. She's one of the most optimistic people I've ever known, so it makes sense that after getting a doctorate in Renaissance literature, that she would go on to get credentials in holistic health and spiritual counseling and a master's degree in counseling. She is an English professor, a positive psychology coach, and does research on hope interventions and so much more. She's a true Renaissance woman with a lot of wisdom to share with you today. Let's get into it. Hi, Diane. Thanks so much for being on my podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, I am too. This is delightful.
You and I used to be colleagues at Santa Clara University. You were in the English department. I was in the psychology department. You have a PhD in Renaissance literature from UCLA. And then you went on to become an award-winning professor, and you've written 5 books, including Tao of Inner Peace, which is a bestseller. And it came out as an ebook in 2021 and an audiobook last year. Bravo.
Oh, thank you.
Happy about all that?
Yeah, the Tao Te Ching was written 25 centuries ago, and apparently its message is still relevant to us today, to try to find balance in our lives, to look for inner peace, to resolve conflicts instead of just getting caught in either or, to see the bigger picture. Yeah. So we need its message, and I'm glad people are paying attention to the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah, well, it's your wonderful wisdom too, not just the Tao Te Ching. You bring yourself to it as well. And I love the way you think about the world. And that is why you're here, because as you know, this podcast is designed to help people find superpowers that they may not be aware that they have, or they may know that they have gifts and passions, but they're not confident enough to tap into them. And so I thought what I would do is dig in. You are such an accomplished woman that we could spend probably a year just talking about everything you've ever done. But what I thought would be good for the listeners is to dive into a couple of superpowers that you have that came to you, I think, early on in your life. So writing and your love for Eastern philosophies. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay. So when did you first discover your love for books? How old were you, and how did that come about?
I cannot remember a time when I did not love books. It's my earliest memory, one of my earliest memories. My father was in the Air Force. We moved all the time. I've lost count of how many schools I was in, but I was in 4 different schools in the 7th grade because he had temporary duty assignments, etc. So every time we went to a new place, I'd find my way to the library and walk around through these cathedrals of knowledge and looking up at the stacks, because I was just a little kid, and bring these books home, and they were like treasures. I could go to my room and enter a new world through these books. And I wanted to enter a new world because my family was somewhat dysfunctional, and the new world was a lot more inspiring. I read about Eleanor Roosevelt, about her autobiography when I was in high school, actually, and the Diary of Anne Frank. And I felt like I knew these people, and that Eleanor Roosevelt had overcome a real dysfunctional family. Her mother ridiculed her. Her father died when she was young. Her mother died. She was orphaned. She was living with her aunt and these uncles who were alcoholics. She had a very low opinion of herself because her mother taught her that she was ugly and she was worthless. And the only thing that was good about her was her ability to take care of others. So I thought, I can relate to that. But she found a mentor and a role model in high school when she went to school in England. And this wonderful teacher saw her, recognized the light she had to share with the world, and made Eleanor aware of it too. So Eleanor Roosevelt has always been one of my virtual mentors, and I have a picture of her on the wall of my study, actually. So I discovered friends, mentors, kindred spirits in books.
That makes so much sense, especially because you're moving around so much. It's probably hard to make friends and then have to make them again and make them again and make them again.
Yeah, I lost a lot of friends because we had to leave them behind all the time. But I could bring my virtual friends with me. You know, I could go to the library and check out Eleanor Roosevelt's book and reread it and say yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know you so well, but that I never thought about it that way before. So thanks for sharing that. So when did you discover that you had a gift for writing?
I don't know if it was necessarily a gift, but an awareness. Walking around in libraries, I'd look up at the books and realize that they were treasures. You know, they were doors to other worlds. And I thought, actually, it was almost a prayer that I would visualize someday that my books would be up there too, and I could join them. I could give back to others what these authors had given to me. Novelists, memoir writers, you know, biographers, autobiographers, all these people who told me their stories. I wanted to be able to do the same thing.
So you knew your calling. You knew your calling already. Do you remember what you used to write about? Like the first things you ever wrote about when you were younger? Anything come to mind?
Oh, yeah. When I was in the 6th grade, I'd sit in the back of the room with a friend of mine, and we were writing novels. I was writing a novel about a girl and her horse. And at that point, I really wanted a horse. But my parents told me reasonably that, you know, we're in the Air Force. We move all the time. You know, we can't bring a horse with us to the next Air Force base.
Yeah.
So, all right. What happened was, but that's what I wanted. You know, I kept visualizing myself riding this horse. And I was writing a book about a girl and a horse. And our next door neighbor, Mr. Loescher in Grandview, Missouri, who ran the local Safeway store, got a horse and kept the horse 2 blocks away in this little corral barn from where I lived. And he said, you know, you can go visit the horse and ride the horse anytime you want. I didn't know anything about horses except for what I read in books, you know, National Velvet and all the rest of that. So I would bring apples and carrots to the horse and figured out how to put the saddle on and rode the horse down the street. And I was small for my age, so being on top of this big horse made me feel really powerful. And a year and a half later, my father got transferred again. And our next door neighbor said, well, I guess I'm going to have to sell the horse then, because Diane is the only one that the horse will let ride her. She is very rebellious. He bought the horse for his son, but the horse didn't want Mr. Loescher or his son Kelly to ride the horse at all. She would buck him off. I didn't know the horse did that. She was very gentle with me. But so I, for a while, I had a horse, and I wrote about the bond between the horse and the girl, and that was kind of something that got demonstrated in my own life.
That's so beautiful. So here's a loaded question. Did you feel like you were supported by your family, by your schools for being a writer, for becoming a writer? I know, but I thought it might be good for us to go there because not everybody is supported by the people around them.
Okay, there are studies of resilience in the psychology literature, kind of a pioneering study in Hawaii, actually, about young people. And they could come from dysfunctional families. The families could be alcoholics, abusive, you know, all this poverty. But if they had one adult who saw them, that made all the difference. You know, a big longitudinal study. The people who were seen when they were young in a formative time of their lives felt that they were worthwhile and they overcame the obstacles. So example, my family of origin was not all that supportive. My father was a pilot and he was up in the air a lot. And literally, he
Yeah.
made long flights. He wasn't around. My mother was a very strange person. She was very charming and very beautiful. And like Eleanor Roosevelt's mother, she said that I was ugly and I wasn't very smart. But my brother, oh, he had a high IQ and he was, very charming. So when I was in the 7th grade, I was very confused. That was the 4 different schools in the same year example. We started out in Grandview, Missouri in the 7th grade, and I was a normal student. My father got transferred to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, and I was there. And the 7th grade was part of the 7th through 12th grade high school. And okay, they gave us aptitude tests in the 7th grade there. And the principal called my mother in and said, "Oh, I need to tell you that Diane's scores on the tests were very strange." And she said, "Well, what do you expect?" She scored at the 12th grade level in all the subjects, English, history, whatever, geography, except for math. And if she took some math courses this summer, she could start college next fall. So my mother came home and told us that at dinner and laughed out loud and said, "Isn't that the silliest thing you ever heard? Can you imagine?" So, that wasn't very good.
Oh, what kept you going?
Well, we got transferred again. And then my dad was transferred to command a radar site outside of Omaha. That was, I guess, in January. We moved up there. We were in Florida for Christmas. And he said, I think I need to put my children in a Catholic school so they get a good education. So I was in this Catholic school, and the nun who ran our class, Sister Mary Rose, was quite something. She was very strict. She felt like if you raised your hand and asked questions in class, you were a troublemaker. You were supposed to be silent and obedient. And of course, I was very curious and I raised my hand and asked questions a lot. And anytime anybody disobeyed her or was considered bad, she'd take one of our books and throw it at the person and across the room. She could have been a major league pitcher. She had a real gift for throwing things. And she could have really injured somebody, hit them off the side of the head, whatever. Yeah. She also kept the class an hour after school. If one student misbehaved, the whole class had to. So after 2 weeks, my father pulled us out of the school because everybody all the children in the radar site were bussed in by an Air Force airman who drove this military staff car. And they had to wait an hour out in the snow in January for my class to get out because we were staying after school. So we all came back an hour late. That wouldn't work. So I was then enrolled in McMillan Junior High School across town. And before I left, though, Sister Mary Rose came and whispered in my ear and told me that I was a delinquent and that good little Catholic girls don't make trouble. Okay, so at McMillan Junior High School, I raised my hand and asked lots of questions. And the teacher, Mrs. Stryker, thought I was a genius. Okay.
There's your person.
And she gave me all this positive reinforcement. She ate lunch with the class every day, at this big long table, and asked us questions about ourselves and related them to some of the people we were studying. And we all felt really supported. So that's what helped me. But otherwise, this was it's confusing to be about 12 years old, between 12 and 13 in the 7th grade anyway.
Yeah.
With all of that strange reinforcement. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not a genius and I'm not a juvenile delinquent. I'm a normal human being here just trying to find my way. But I really appreciated Mrs. Stryker, who actually took our class to the Nebraska State Teachers Conference to show what we were doing in class. We were doing panels on different countries. And this was great because we had lived in different countries and I had costumes and things from different countries. So I'd bring them into the class. And instead of being considered a troublemaker, I was considered a good student. So that was something I really appreciated. And my writing, she thought I wrote really well and I asked good questions. So it took one teacher who saw me that made a big difference.
Okay, dear listeners, I wanted to pause here and check in with you. Your purpose is to find your gifts and use them in the world, whether it be in a job or in a passion project. But sometimes you have to remove the obstacles that get in the way. And one of those obstacles is not having your gifts reflected back to you, not having people recognize them in you. But as Diane said, it only takes one person to see us for who we are for us to be able to see ourselves. And for her, it was a teacher. After our interview, I thought about it for a while and realized I was lucky enough to have two high school teachers see the gold in me. I'd like to give a shout out to Phyllis Godwin and Nancy McMillan at Campbell High School. Thank you so much. You saved my life. Well, what about you now? Take a moment to think about it. Our parents don't always see us. Sometimes it takes a teacher or a friend or a mentor or even a therapist or a coach. Who saw you? What gifts did they recognize in you? Take some time to think about this because, to be honest with you, I had to reflect on it a little while before I found my answer. Next, I'm going to talk to Diane about how she brought her passion for Eastern philosophies together with her writing talent to answer her true calling. Are you ready? Let's go. Well, I read in Science and Mind magazine that you were already drawn to the Tao Te Ching when you were 10 years old. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're moving on to topic number 2, the Eastern philosophies that how did this come about? How did you know that you were drawn to that? And the reason why I'm asking you these questions is because I'm hoping that the listeners are getting clues for how they can figure this out about themselves too. So,
Okay. I think that one of the things that has helped me discover who I am and who I am becoming, because I believe we're always becoming, is to follow my curiosity, which, according to the VIA Character Strength Survey that positive psychologists have worked on, is one of my top strengths. And it got me in trouble in the Catholic school, but it also helped me write a dissertation and learn a lot of things. And when I was 10 years old, my father was stationed at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. And we'd lived in the continental United States and, been part of the 1950s, 60s normal American life. And over there, we had this house with mango and papaya trees and palm trees, coconut trees growing in our yard. And our windows were made out of seashells, not glass. They had louvered openings and screens, but they were these beautiful little shells in kind of a, square, little squares with shells inside. There was this beautiful glow, Yeah. So this was a different world. And my father was a pilot, so he would fly to Hong Kong and Tokyo and various Saigon and all these places, and he'd bring back Asian art, all this glorious Asian art, which was different again from anything I'd ever known. And one of the things about Asian art is that Chinese brush painting, for example, doesn't have a lot of stuff in the background. There's a balance of the foreground bamboo and then this empty space. The Japanese call it yohaku, which is part of what balances the picture. And I thought, yes, instead of cluttering up our lives, we Americans seem to like to have a lot of stuff going on. In the East, there was a sense of serenity. So I tried to do Chinese brush painting and would listen to stories from people who had been, again, in Asia. We we had all kinds of help in the Philippines. We had a person who cleaned our house and who lived with us and who cooked gourmet food. His name was Baltimore, and he would clean the floor by dancing on a coconut husk.
Oh, wow.
And because the coconut, actually was like a polish. And I thought, what fun. So I got one, and Baltimore and I'd be dancing around on the floor. But what I wanted to do was learn more about the wisdom of the East. So I talked to people and asked them questions. And as a 10-year-old, all I could do was try to do Chinese brush painting and try to do Chinese calligraphy. I looked at it and tried to copy it because I wanted to be part of that world. And then my father got transferred again. So we were then sent to Grandview, Missouri. And I was in an art class in the 6th grade, drawing a picture of a palm tree. And all the other kids in the class laughed at me. And they said, ha ha, Diane doesn't know how to draw a tree. She has all the branches coming out of the top. Isn't that ridiculous? And the teacher said, there are trees like that someplace. And I thought, there is no one way to be a tree. There's the wisdom of the East and the wisdom of the West. And I saw that when I was really young, and I just gravitated toward the wisdom of the East because it seemed to offer the balance that I needed, that we needed in our world. I loved contemplative yin time, going off to myself and reading, and, balancing all the yang noise and activity that my family seemed to get into. And then when I was in high school and college, I actually started reading Eastern philosophy and studying the Tao and learning to meditate in earnest. But I was drawn to that at a very, very young age.
So you were drawn to books at a very young age. This is why I wanted to ask you about these two first, because I'm seeing with a lot of my interviews and people that I've taught over the years that our superpowers are there really, really early on. And some people see them and some people don't. Some people have support systems around them to develop them, get them piano lessons if they're good on the piano, and some people don't. And some people don't, and they fulfill their purpose anyway, like you, which is, I'm so glad to be talking to you about all of this. I want people to not give up if they were one of the ones that wasn't seen, because it sounds like your internal world was really, really rich through all of these external changes that you were going through.
I think that's part of what I learned from Eastern philosophy too, and from the wisdom of the East is the importance of, the Tao says there's yin and yang, darkness and light, sunlight and shadow, and from the yin and yang come the forms of all creation. Creativity comes from looking within and finding, reflecting, spending time listening to our hearts. Because sometimes the people outside of us can't see us.
Yeah, well, as you know, I've had experience with that too. So what I really find interesting about you, I find everything interesting about you, but what I want to talk about next that I find interesting about you is how you took your superpower for writing and your passion for Eastern philosophies and brought them together and wrote these books like the Tao of Inner Peace, the Tao of Personal Leadership, the Tao of Womanhood. And you did this as an English professor. How did that happen? How did that work? And what did your colleagues think of that? Loaded question again.
Yeah, it was sort of like my 7th grade experience. I was an assistant professor at Santa Clara University, published my first book on the spiritual awareness, spiritual pilgrimages in Renaissance literature, very scholarly book based on my dissertation. And went up for promotion and got turned down. So I said, okay, well, and then published more books and articles. And then I published a book on Shakespeare, which is Domination and Defiance, the first book on the father-daughter relationship in Shakespeare, which was, with the University of Kentucky Press. It was a major, and went up for promotion again and got turned down. And went and talked to the academic vice president, because we could say, well, what was the reason that I got turned down here? My professors at UCLA were sure I was going to be promoted, and they said, you would have been promoted at UCLA with your record, but not at Santa Clara University. And he said, well, the committee decided that your research wasn't mature enough. And I said, what?
That's insane.
There was a whole chapter on King Lear. Is that not mature? Well, the problem was that there was a sort of ageist, sexist bias going on there. And I was only the 5th woman tenured at Santa Clara University. So when I went up for promotion, they looked at me and figured, you don't look like a full professor. You don't look like, okay, I was tenured as an associate. So I went up for full professor. There were only a very few, older gentlemen who would all have coffee together. And I didn't fit so I said, well, I said a few 4-letter words and decided that I have done all this scholarly stuff, and now I'm going to write about something that I really care about. And I wrote the Tao of Inner Peace, and I got promoted to full professor.
Oh my God, what a beautiful lesson there. Oh my God, follow your heart, follow your passion. Oh my gosh. Well, I just want to point out too that I also was up against that in academia. And I think having long blonde hair and being pretty doesn't help at all in that world. It's just another reason to not take you seriously. I don't know if you were up against that, but I definitely was up against that.
Yeah. The person who got promoted before me came across as totally different from me. Okay. He looked the part, apparently, more than I did.
No, I mean, I was only the second year they let women into the graduate program at Princeton. And it was very confusing. They didn't know what to do with us. To women running around. And I think I've told you once that they said, one of the professors said, I love having women here. We can work them like slaves.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I know I kind of have a little bit of a feel for what you're up against. But what I love about your story too is just that when you really followed your own path, you were seen, actually.
Yeah, well, it's funny that way. I figured, okay, I've tried to fit into the external expectations, scholarship, etc., and said to H with all that. I have done it and it didn't work. So what do I have to lose? And really enjoyed writing about Eastern philosophy applied to our contemporary lives.
Yeah. And it became a bestseller.
Yeah. And people are still reading it. It's come out in 3 different editions, plus the audiobook, plus the,
it keeps
ebook
on giving. It's relevant. It's always relevant. It's probably more relevant now than even before, I'm guessing.
Yes, because one of the chapters really focuses on how we can get stuck into a polarized view of the world. Either or, all or nothing, right or wrong, friend or enemy. And that keeps us from solving problems. It makes us, instead of looking at the problem and working together to solve it, it makes us blame somebody else for the problem. And the problem is still here. If I point at somebody and say it's your fault, well, nothing is done to solve the problem. And what we do is, we use all our energy and our time attacking each other.
We're giving our power away when we blame somebody else. When you blame somebody else, you're actually putting yourself in a victim mode.
Absolutely.
Well, I also wanted to ask you, I want to ask you a lot of things, but I also wanted to ask you about, you mentioned that you wanted to talk about trusting your intuition to follow your path, to chart your destiny. Can you say more about that? I'm sure my listeners will be very, very interested.
Yeah. First of all, I think we need to listen to ourselves, listen to our hearts. And when we do that, sometimes we get guidance. Carl Jung called it synchronicity. People call it lots of different things. But when I was in college, I'd applied to UCLA, which was my dream school. But when we moved back to California from Germany, where my father had been stationed, where I went to high school, I was packing up my clothes to go to UCLA one August. We'd moved back in, I think, July. And my mother said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Hey, I'm packing my clothes. I'm going to UCLA in a couple of weeks." And she said, "Oh, your father and I have talked. And we transferred your acceptance from UCLA to UC Riverside, so you don't need to go away to college."
Oh my God, that is so controlling.
And I said, "Why?" Well, we can't afford it. So that was my first year of college, which I spent a few months worrying about my parents' financial status. But then my mother, that Christmas, that was, I guess, August, in December, she got a new mink coat and a Mercedes for Christmas. So it wasn't the money. It was the fact that somehow she did not want me to go to UCLA, partly because I dusted and vacuumed, cleaned up the kitchen, set the table, helped make the dinner, and did, clean the bathrooms and stuff. She would have lost her maid. So I thought, okay, they're not going to support my education. I've got to get a job. So I commuted to school my freshman year. And then that summer, I was working for a temporary agency, doing all these little temp office jobs to try to get enough money to be able to get away and go and be an independent college student. And I was driving home my parents' old red Volkswagen down 14th Street in Riverside one afternoon. I think it was a Friday afternoon at the end of a temp job week. And a voice inside my head said, "You're a writer. You should work there," as I passed the Riverside Press Enterprise office, the newspaper in town. So I turned the car into the parking lot, went inside and said, as this shy teenager, "Hi, I'm Diane Dreher. I'm a writer. I'd like to apply for a job." And the reporter said, "Oh, go upstairs to the personnel office and fill out some forms." So I did that. And they said, "Oh, good. Well, our college intern just gave notice this morning. Can you start work on Monday?"
Wow.
Yes, absolutely. Perfect job. Open 24/7. Could work around all my classes. Learned how to be a writer from all these wonderful reporters.
So it's not only follow your intuition, but follow it ASAP. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Because I think because I've noticed that with myself too. Sometimes there's a window on it. It's meant, if you can, act on it immediately.
Yeah, right. It's like, okay, depending upon how we explain it, is it synchronicity? But I could not have known that the college intern gave notice that morning. They hadn't even advertised the job yet. I walked right into it that day.
I love that story.
We get guidance from our intuition. If, some people say we have a guardian angel, we have spirit guides, we have something that cares about our welfare, that cares about our future. We have guides as teachers and mentors, people who see us. And we also have something, we have an invisible means of support, our inner guidance. And if we listen to it, when we're on the right path, we get signs, we get help, we get support.
Wow. I was going to ask you another question, but you may have answered it, or you may want to say more. So there's a quote that I lifted from the Science of Mind magazine that I really love that you said. Part of becoming who we can be is recognizing the gifts we've been given and then connecting those gifts and values to our path. And a lot of listeners of this podcast don't know how to recognize their gifts or how to connect them to their path. So I wanted to ask you if you have any advice for them.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Your Personal Renaissance, all about how to find your calling, and about how people in the Renaissance found their callings. And sometimes they didn't always get support either. Michelangelo's father wanted him to be a cloth merchant so he could make money for the family. And so when he was a little boy, when Michelangelo was a little boy, when he'd be drawing pictures, his father would take out a whip and beat him and tell him, "Don't do that. It's stupid. You'll never make anything of your life that way." Fortunately for us, Michelangelo persevered. We find what we love to do as children. There are clues to discovering our gifts. If, Michelangelo obviously was drawn to art. That was who he was. And his father was not going to beat it out of him. I loved books. I loved stories when I was really young. Some people loved music. And yeah. And it's just, it's what we love to do as children. If you can recall a time when you were young, what did you love? Did you love the great outdoors? Did you love playing team sports? Maybe one of your strengths is teamwork, leadership that way. So we can find that clues in our own lives. There's the viacharacter.org free survey that's developed by Martin Seligman, Christopher Peterson, and a whole lot of other positive psychologists from a study of character strengths that they've studied worldwide and discovered there are 24 character strengths that are common to all humanity, which is amazing considering all the differences we have in our world. But we all value courage, creativity, spirituality, love of learning, and a sense of justice and fairness. I mean, there's a sense of these, and to find out, to take the www.viacharacter.org, to take that survey, it's free. You don't have to subscribe to any of their paid things. You just download that. And the studies have shown that when people use their strengths on a regular basis, they're healthier, happier, and more successful.
Mm-hmm.
To connect our strengths, our character strengths, our talents like music, art, love of nature, with our values. That's how we zero in on our calling. And we also feel a sense of flow, a sense of, energy when we're doing what we're called to do. It feels like this is who I am.
I also think it's really important what you pointed out about just having one person see you, because I know a lot of people who are disconnected from their gifts because they suppressed them, because they weren't seen, because they were ignored, because they were laughed at. So I think that's another amazing point that you brought into all of this. Any last thoughts about that?
I totally agree. Eleanor Roosevelt had Mademoiselle Souvestre, her teacher, who saw her, the first person who saw her in her life. And I believe that we're all here. We're all given a unique set of gifts. We're as unique as each snowflake. In fact, no person in the world has ever had the same fingerprints as you do, or I do, or any of the people who are listening. We're all a unique part of the great tapestry of life, and we owe it to ourselves and to the world to discover our gifts and bring them forward and share them.
Well, listeners, I hope you were as inspired by Diane as I was. I have included links to her website and the free VIA survey she was talking about to help you find your personal strengths in the show notes. I also wanted to let you know that after editing this podcast even more, I remembered 3 other people who saw my musical gifts. The teachers I mentioned before saw my academic promise, but I was really racking my brain to think of who in the world saw my musical gifts. And it took me some time thinking about it. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because I want you to take this seriously. It's a really great exercise to do. So I remembered later that when I went to Princeton University, where I was getting my doctorate in cognitive psychology, I was dating a guy who was 2 years behind me, who had just come into the program, who had been in a rock band, but had decided that he was going to leave that behind to become a psychologist. And here I was getting my doctorate in psychology and recognizing that I could sing and write songs. And John saw me. He thought I was talented. He played guitar while I sang at a party behind the psychology building the day before I defended my dissertation. I think without John, I may not have made that leap. I may not have taken the risk to leave my academic career to become a rock and roll star if he hadn't seen me. So for those of you out there who have been marginalized because of the color of your skin or your gender identity, people may not see your gifts because they stereotype you. But just remember, it only takes one person. Thank you, Diane, so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you for listening to Your True Calling. Please leave a review and share it with your friends. From my website, yourtruecalling.org, you can follow me on social media, learn more about my music and my coaching, contact me to find your superpowers live on the air, and help me produce future episodes by funding me on Patreon.